Good morning. Time for today's AM Minnesota program. Very serious topic today. We are going to be talking about skin cancer, melanoma. My guest in the program, well, when I mention the guest, you're going to think we're going to be talking about the frustrations of the late corn planting season, other agronomic issues. Jay Zielske is a territory manager with Pioneer and also an agronomist. And Jay, we might get a couple mentions in about don't panic yet, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Jerry. I think that's first and foremost on a lot of folks' mind, especially as they look outside on this kind of dreary day here.
I took a lot of solace in your weekly agronomy update. And when you pointed out last year, May 7th, about May 15th, the vast majority of the corn was planted in our area, and for a lot of guys, it was the best corn crop ever. The calendar says the 11th today, right?
That's exactly right, Jerry. So we've got some time, and the good thing is well, if we can count on that weather forecast for the next 5 days or so, looks encouraging that we'll be able to dry things out and get a chance to get back in the field and get the crop in the ground in good condition.
Yeah, a little dreary here the rest of today, tonight, maybe Saturday, a touch Sunday, but then it's amazing when I got to the studio and saw that stretch of 70, 80 degree weather next week, how much better I felt.
Yeah, exactly. And there's probably a certain number of guys out there that are fishermen. They're thinking, well, it's going to be too wet to plant, so I'll have a chance to hook up the boat and get a little fishing in for the fishing opener over the weekend, too.
Yeah, it just goes to show you that Jay was looking for something to do today, too, because when we were lining up the program, the original plan was you'd be in your office somewhere on the hard line because I thought you'd be a little bit busy. I got an email this morning. Nothing else to do, Jerry. I'll come into the studio.
That's exactly right. We had some plots that would have been planning to go in, but with the rain and such, that wasn't going to work out today. And I thought, well, I have a chance to scout out and see how planting progress is between Mankato and Faribault. So it's nice to be here, Jerry.
Well, the major reason you're here, this is National Melanoma Month, skin cancer, and really happy to say you are a cancer survivor, very personal experience, and now you want to help get the word out to those of us involved in agriculture about skin cancer. It's preventable and very treatable if diagnosed early.
That's exactly right, Jerry. And I think it's important that we can talk about. We'll probably have a chance in the course of the interview to talk about some of the preventative measures. One of the first things to think about is really just like farmers scout their fields for weeds. They should be scouting their bodies for abnormal-looking moles, and especially on the back or side, which is an area a lot of times a person's not going to see if they look in the mirror. And Jerry, I think you headlined this on the web as being "Get Naked," and that's kind of the tagline for the Melanoma Research Foundation as far as creating awareness to get naked so somebody can scout your body, so to speak, and see if there's any of those abnormal moles.
And whether that's your spouse, a significant other, your doctor, even a friend, if someone here came and said, would you look at my back and pull up their shirt? Yes, because friends help friends out.
That's exactly right, Jerry. And I think one of the things, since I first kind of shared my story in meetings I have with growers, within that first year I had 8 different people come up and tell me that they had discovered that they had melanoma, and every one of those individuals except for one first discovered their lesion on their back or their side.
And we have to take a break for the markets in about a minute, but that's where we want to pick it up maybe after the market break, because you'd think skin cancer caused by damage from the sun, well, then it would be your arms, your face, your ears, maybe your neck. But many people, it's their back, and they don't go without a shirt.
Absolutely, it's their back, and they don't go without a shirt, and then also it's hard to see. It's hard to see, and so it can occur anywhere on your body, but that's a place that's often overlooked.
And that's why it makes the disease more deadly, because it's more progressed before it's discovered, I assume.
Exactly right, exactly right. It's like for farmers when they first discover a problem weed, a cocklebur, tall water hemp, or something on their farm, it's best to get at it right away before it progresses and get out of control, and then it's harder to change things.
Maybe the national campaign next year should have the slogan, "Scout your body."
I think that sounds like a good idea, Jerry.
Jay, if you can stand by, we have to take a break for the markets, and we'll continue with today's AM Minnesota program, National Melanoma Month and SkinCancer.com. My guest in the program today is Jay Zielske, who's a territory manager for Pioneer, also an agronomist. Jay, we mentioned during the market break, it's hard to believe you and I have known each other for 23 years.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think the first time was the harvest broadcast at the LeCan farm out west of Faribault here, if I remember right.
That's right. And here we are 23 years later and umpteen interviews later.
That's exactly right, Jerry. And it's always a pleasure to have an interview with you when it comes to some agronomic topics. Since you farm yourself, you know the right questions to ask without me even prompting you, which really makes it a joy and a pleasure. And then also to hear, being interviewed by you, hear your own experiences on your farm. So it's a pleasure to be here, Jerry.
Well, let's get to the topic, melanoma, skin cancer. Just before the market break, we were talking about melanoma oftentimes shows up as a mole on your back. And that's why the national campaign has a slogan, take the challenge.
As far as the Get Naked challenge, and I think that it's important to clarify, Jerry, really anywhere on your body, anywhere that you have pigmentation cells, you can get a melanoma or a skin cancer, and it just so happens a lot of times that your back or your side is an area that's easily overlooked. And we talk about getting naked and scouting your body, and then they always talk about the ABCs, ABCDEs of melanoma, and if you're looking at moles, what should you look for? And A is for asymmetrical shape to that
kind of ragged edge.
Yeah, exactly, and the borders for non-cancerous moles oftentimes tend to be kind of smooth. That's the B part of it, and the C would be color. It could be black, brown, or tan. And then a lot of times with melanoma, the diameter of the moles will be about the size of the diameter of a pencil eraser, something like that.
Boy, that's easy to miss it when you think about the size of a pencil eraser.
It's very, very easy for a person to miss. And I think if a person is scouting their body and they see a mole that just seems to not look quite right, you've heard about the ABCDEs. It's something somebody could search on the web. But schedule an appointment with a dermatologist to take a look at your body and those moles that you happen to have. And I think the thing is that sometimes it's hard to schedule an appointment with a dermatologist.
Yeah. So should you maybe start with your family physician?
That's going to be the first place to start, and then they may have a chance to then refer you to a dermatologist. And as I encourage people, it's hard to schedule those appointments, and sometimes it may be a couple months off. Be sure that you hold true to that appointment and get it checked out.
I was going in a year ago for my yearly checkup. My doctor gets kind of ornery. He won't renew my prescriptions more than a year at a time, so he knows I have to get in there. And I had this brown spot that showed up about where your sideburn would be on your face. And Louise noticed it, and she said, make sure you mention that to Dr. Sikora, that he looks at that. I think it looks okay, but, well, I mentioned to him, and he kind of chuckled and said, yep, that's a sign, Jerry, you aren't quite as young as you used to be. It was just sometimes you get those pigments as you get a little bit older. But I had it checked out. It was nothing. If he would have had any question or any concerns, he would have then referred me to a dermatologist, I assume, immediately.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that surprises a lot of people is that the skin cancers are really the most common of any of the cancers. And I think that really surprises a lot of people. Now, melanoma happens to have its own month because it's the deadliest of the skin cancers, but there's a lot of people, any of us that work in agriculture, quite a few people you've run into that they said they had a spot on their nose or on their cheek that they had removed, and it was a basal cell carcinoma. And there's also the squamous cell, and then the granddaddy of them all ends up being melanoma, which can be very, very deadly if not detected early enough. And like you said earlier, it's all about early detection.
And sometimes unusual too, though. Why don't you tell your personal story, Jay? You didn't have an unusual looking mole that you went to get checked out. You had a shock one morning, and yesterday it wasn't there. Today I have this bump.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jerry. I was kind of the exception to the rule in that one morning back in September of 2014, I was shaving and I happened to be pulling the razor blade up my neck towards my jawline, and I noticed 3 bumps there, which turned out to be enlarged lymph nodes.
And they weren't very large?
They probably, what would I say? Probably about the size, if I would have felt it, probably about the size of a ping pong ball, something like that. It's not like it was really standing out a whole lot to anybody else walking by. Probably wouldn't have noticed it, but it was noticeable to me. And when those lymph nodes were biopsied, much to the surprise of the doctors, it tested positive for melanoma. And really that was just kind of the beginning of it.
Boy, that had to be like a kick in the stomach. Obviously, you weren't expecting that all at once. I mean, you're an intelligent guy. You've seen the statistics. When they said melanoma, you must have thought, well, I better get my affairs in order. That's right? I mean, exactly what happened, wasn't it?
That's about how it went, Jerry, because after that, through a couple of surgeries and some scans, really we had diagnosed and it had been assessed that it had actually spread throughout my body. It had metastasized and spread throughout my body to my lungs, to my inside of my femur bone, to my liver, and also somewhere in my gut area is what the doctors had told me. So it had progressed quite rapidly, and yet I never had any skin lesions, which was one of the things that really surprised the doctors when pathology came back and tested positive for melanoma. Then they were trying to search to find the source, the original source of the disease, and after a couple of days there was no known primary source, is what they referred to as a primary source. We never ever found it, so it kind of remained a mystery. One of the doctors said that was encouraging news in the fact that perhaps I might have had what was beginning to develop into a skin lesion, but my immune system kicked in and shut it down, but not before it had progressed throughout the rest of my body.
And then the cancer spread, and then the treatment, maybe it was meant to be, but some new treatment, just as you were diagnosed, was being introduced, some new drugs.
Absolutely, Jerry. The immunotherapy drugs, and many folks have probably heard about them. There's been a lot of buzz in the media about immunotherapy that unlike traditional chemotherapy, which is almost kind of like toxin to your body and toxin to the cancer cells, immunotherapy boosts your immune system up to fight off, to recognize the cancer cells and to fight off the disease. And fortunately, my immune system happened to be very responsive. It was a quick learner and very responsive as far as helping to again make progress in shutting down the melanoma in my body.
And now here we are, what, 2.5, 3 years later? No, almost 4.
It'll be 4 years this fall, and it has been, the last time I saw cancer on a PET scan of my body was March of 2016. And so my most recent scan was in April of this year. Another clean scan. I go in 3 to 4 month intervals for PET scans to detect presence of cancer in my body. So so far so good, Jerry, and I'm just so fortunate.
And so now you're maybe using your second lease on life to try and educate the people that you spend most of your career with and your time, this big field of agriculture, because when you start looking at some of the stats, farmers, Minnesotans are much more prone to melanoma and skin cancer than many other professions, and even farmers from other states.
I think you're absolutely right. So if we look at those of us in agriculture, whether it be farmers, agronomists, consultants, and other, we spend a lot of time out of doors in Minnesota. As Minnesotans, there's a lot of us like to spend time out of doors. But I think one of the statistics that just shocked me when I saw it a year ago is that Minnesota ranks 4th nationally in the incidence of melanoma, and actually at the top of the list is Utah. It's Utah, New Hampshire, and Connecticut are like, and then Minnesota's number 4. And
what happened to Arizona, Texas, Florida? Maybe
It's an excellent question because it makes absolutely no sense, and yet as I've heard it explained, it probably has much to do with ethnicity or our heritage in much of Minnesota and the upper Midwest, at least Northern European heritage. When my ancestors came over from Germany and settled in the North Morristown area, that's Northern Europeans. And so I think a lot of Minnesota was settled by Northern Europeans, Scandinavians and such, with a little bit fairer skin. Would perhaps suggest why we maybe have higher incidence than what you might expect.
Because typically if you have a darker complexion or another ethnic group that has darker skin, they have less incidence typically of skin cancer?
It appears that way. I'm more of an expert on agronomy, corn and soybeans, than I am on melanoma and that. But that would be my assumption and my guess there. And I think you get someplace like Utah. I think a lot of that, and you'll see some of the mountain states where you have snow and reflection of the sunlight off the snow in the winter. It's all very interesting.
The stat that really jumped out at me is most common form of cancer, and then melanoma, the deadliest, and also the most preventable cancer of basically all of them. Like, sure, men worry about prostate cancer, women are concerned about ovarian and breast cancer, but yet we're more likely to get skin cancer, and that's one we can do the most about to make sure we don't.
That's exactly right, Jerry. I mean, I think that you nailed it right on the head. I mean, it's very preventable because over about 90% of skin cancers are related to UV or ultraviolet ray exposure.
That's the sun.
That's the sun. And so for a person to wear protective clothing, to wear some long sleeve shirts, to wear a wide brimmed hat, to use sunscreen, and to wear some sunglasses are going to be great measures that a person can take on that prevention side, Jerry. And I was one of those people that I detested sunscreen. I didn't want to use sunscreen over the years, and every spring I'd tell myself, you got to get with the program here. You're at high risk. And I do really good for about a week or two, and then it just seemed like it was just kind of annoying, and I just said, well, I'll get one of those basal cell carcinomas, and then once they burn one of those off, then I'll get serious about this. And we can see that didn't work very well for me, and so for me, I think as a survivor, I see it as being my duty now to try to get the message out to as many people as possible. For those people that I continue to really not like to put sunscreen on a whole lot. I cover up my head and my nose and my ears and my neck. And then I actually happen to have, like the athletes have, the sleeves, the protective sleeves they can put on. That's what I'll wear in the summer. I'll have my short sleeve shirt. So if it's a hot, sunny day and I'm going to be exposed to the sun, I still have my short sleeve shirt on, but I slide my sleeves on to protect my arms and forearms. And if it ends up turning out cloudy later on that day, I'll slip the sleeves off, and it works out really good. I don't have to put sunscreen all over my arms, but kind of have that morning routine before I get on the road in my truck, that I put that sunscreen on my head, my neck, my nose, and cover up real well there, Jerry.
Maybe our grandfather's generation or great grandfathers knew something, because when you see the pictures of them out thrashing, what did they have? They had bib overalls. Many times they did have long sleeves, and they didn't have the seed corn hats like we all wear with just the visor in the front. They had big straw hats on. Yep. Maybe they knew something that we didn't.
I think that's exactly right, and I think as things have evolved over the time, that may be why there's a higher incidence of some of these skin cancers now, like you say, because of the styles and the clothing and such as well. So I think, Jerry, I think one of the other things that really surprises people is, I think if you're in, for me, it's the cab of my pickup as I'm driving around my territory to work with growers or farmers in the cab of their tractor, combine, whatever. There's that sense of, false sense of security, but you're still getting exposed to UV rays through that windshield and in the cab of that tractor, the cab of the combine, you name it. And so don't want people to think just because they're in the cab that they're safe and not being exposed to those UV rays. They are.
Now, if you're in the hog barn, the cattle barn, the milking parlor, then maybe you're okay, but not the office in the field, your tractor. In fact, maybe even when you think about that, how hot it gets in there with all of that glass, maybe it actually is making you more vulnerable by sitting in that glass bubble.
It could be. It could be. What, is there a greenhouse effect, so to speak, when you're in the cab of the tractor or cab of your truck? It's hard to know for certain. Jerry, and I think one of the other interesting things here is for people probably about our age, Jerry, in that about 60%, close to 2/3 of melanoma deaths are in men over 50 years of age. I was 54 when I had discovered my diagnosis, and so I think that's something for people to be aware of. And yet, on the other end of the spectrum, that age group, both young men and women in their 20s and early 30s, skin cancer and melanomas are actually growing at about the fastest rate of cancers in that age group. And my girls, I have 3 daughters. They used to always want to get ready for prom or whatever with a visit to the tanning salon, a tanning bed. Well, that's definitely out.
And the tanning beds aren't any safer than laying out in the backyard in the sun, correct?
It's probably actually even worse, Jerry, to the best of my understanding. And so, I think a lot of people, I got to be careful because we may have some smokers who are listeners, but a person always assumes that there's a certain amount of risk associated with lung cancer if a person smokes a cigarette. Well, a person's risk of getting skin cancer if they're visit a tanning bed is actually even greater than the risk of a person developing lung cancer from smoking cigarettes. And so if that wouldn't scare people from not wanting to go to a tanning bed, they want to have that nice brown look. And now they can get the spray tans, and that's a lot safer.
Isn't there some sort of makeup, something you can get that'll do the same thing?
Absolutely, Jerry. Absolutely. So I think whether it be you're a man, 50 years of age or older, or in that younger segment as we just mentioned, we really need to be aware of the sun and really protect ourselves from the sun. It doesn't matter whether it's farmers. I'm involved in agriculture, so that's where I want to get the message. It doesn't matter where we're at. This weekend we got fishing opener.
Yeah, okay, so magnifying off the water might make it even worse.
Absolutely. Fishermen, and I think it's interesting. Last weekend I was to Madison, Wisconsin, went by one of the lakes there. It's the fishing opener there. Saw a boat by the shore, and I saw one gentleman, and he was excuse me, he was well covered up from head to toe and including his neck. And actually, if you go to some of the fishing gear websites, a lot of them will have like neck gaiters and such that you can pull up and over your ears and your nose to protect you from your exposure, and also some of those wide-brimmed hats. So yeah, it doesn't matter whether you're a farmer, a person in town, outdoorsman, those of us that get exposed to the sun.
Construction workers.
Absolutely. You go on down the list.
And it isn't too late. I'm old. I've never bothered with sunscreen. I've never had a suntan. I just get a sunburn. I just instantly tan. So at this late date, it doesn't matter. Done is done. No, even it would help if you start today, right?
You're exactly right, Jerry, because I tended to think, people always told me that it even looked like when it wasn't summer, I still seemed to have a little bit darker complexion, not as fair as a typical Northern European heritage person, and so I was thinking that maybe that would help me out. Well, it did, Jerry.
But that bleached kind of hair looked really cool when you're younger, I suppose, didn't it?
Yeah, it really did. When I had hair, I thought that looked pretty good, but it was foolish looking back on it. So, Jerry, I think the thing here too is we spent a lot of time talking about melanoma, talking about skin cancers, but I think the thing is, since I started my journey with melanoma, it's interesting how it works. You become that much more aware of other people that have cancers, whether it be the same type of cancer as you or not. And I just tell you, for anybody that has a diagnosis, there's hope. And that I've seen so many people that I've followed since my diagnosis, and a lot of neat wins and some big wins with people that had advanced cancer. And that doesn't mean that we're winning them all, because we're certainly not. But a lot of great survivor stories there. One of the doctors that I happened to visit in Mankato told me, he says, well, we're going to go with this treatment, and we're hoping, if nothing else, this will keep you going till the next treatment comes on down the line.
The next new breakthrough, the next hope.
Exactly. And so whether it be melanoma or any of the other cancers, I think a person needs to have hope. And as I attended a melanoma symposium the spring after my diagnosis, I heard a doctor there share some amazing stories of people that had very dire diagnoses. And he said, they had these very dire diagnoses and miraculous turnarounds. And what was a common thread? It was a strong faith. It was a supportive family and friends and a positive attitude. And I thought that was very interesting. I took that to heart, and it was encouraging to me and provided me a lot of hope in my journey.
And it helped too with our world of agriculture, the support you had. You know what? We're more than 23 years, you become friends.
You're absolutely right, Jerry. You're absolutely right. And my employer was so understanding of any time I need to go for treatments or doctor's appointments. I was never ever asked, okay, exactly how many days were you gone? They never asked any questions. They were concerned about my well-being and me getting healthy again.
Well, we've got the news coming up, Jay, but take the challenge, take the pledge, get naked, check things out, and go to the melanoma website for more information.
Absolutely. Melanoma Research Foundation.
Thank you, Jay. Jay Zielske, cancer survivor, on today's AM Minnesota program. And here's news from ABC.